Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The House has already left town, but the Senate still has a crowded agenda that includes spending legislation, nominations, and other administration priorities. Whether lawmakers actually leave Washington as scheduled may depend on how much of that work they can complete first. Here with the latest is Bloomberg Government's Deputy News Director, Loren Duggan. Loren, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
The Senate was in town last week all by themselves. They did move some things forward. It was a big week for confirmation hearings. They got some key defense folks through. Talk about that first.
Sure. I mean, they started off their week with confirming Jay Clayton to be the full-time Director of National Intelligence. Bill Pulte has been serving as the interim there for a while, and there was interest among a lot of senators in getting a full-time person on there. That was off the to-do list. They also got halfway through with a package of 74 nominees that is pulling together things like TSA, FEMA, Deputy OMB Director, some judicial positions and ambassadors. So that moved at least halfway over the line, and they'll try to get back to that. So there was good news, some committee action too, getting the potential head of the CDC through the Senate Help Committee. So we saw a lot of things move forward, but I think inherent in your question is that some things didn't move forward, which we can maybe touch on.
Let's do that, because some things didn't move forward, most specifically the AG.
That's right. Todd Blanche, who has been nominated, he's acting attorney general now, has been nominated to be full-time. His committee vote, though, had to be canceled after there was pushback from Republicans, in particular John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who wanted some sort of assurance around the $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund that was created several months ago as part of a settlement between the government and Trump. So we will see if they can move that forward in the coming weeks. President Trump said that he might withdraw the nomination and just have him serve in an acting capacity till those two senators are gone. But those senators also said, at least one of them, that they're not the only people that have concerns about this. So that one seems on a yellow light, at least going into the weekend. We'll see if they can work something out, though.
Loren, when you think about the Blanche hearings and you pair them with the Fauci testimony that certainly got a lot of headlines last week, I don't want to revisit the content of that so much, but the atmosphere around both of them and the Republican positions versus the Democratic positions. What does that tell you about the governing approach, kind of what's left on the runway between here and the midterms?
I mean, the next few months will be rocky, but they also won't be here very much. So they'll use these windows where they are here to draw contrasts. And some people want to litigate aspects of the COVID response, including Fauci's role in it, because he was so prominent across both the last year of the first Trump administration and into the Biden years as well, things that he did there. So I think, they're trying to draw a contrast. They're trying to make that happen. But, Democrats will say, if you give us the gavels next year by giving us the majority in the House and the Senate, they have different questions that they want to ask of different people. So we've seen tough questions put to witnesses already by Democrats and, as we noted, some Republicans, and that'll probably continue. And I think the confirmation path, if the Democrats make significant gains in the Senate or take it over, becomes much more difficult.
So do these hearings become less about the content of the hearings themselves and the creation of talking points for folks when they're home on the campaign trail?
I mean, I think that's part of it. A good clip on the media is helpful to you, and social media, perhaps even more so, where people are looking for that. One of the things I noted before the hearing is Rand Paul, the senator of the Government Affairs Committee that held that hearing, put out a lot of tweets about Anthony Fauci, and many of them used memes and probably AI-generated things about Fauci, referencing his diary and other things. So, I think there was trying to build momentum on social media before the hearing, then get the clips from the hearing. That is an ecosystem that people exist in.
Loren Duggan is Deputy News Director for Bloomberg Government. Loren, that Senate is still going to be here for the rest of this week, at least, maybe longer. We're not sure if they're packing their suitcases yet or not. So let's turn our attention to what's on the agenda for the coming week. Let's start with the continuing resolution. That seemed to make some progress.
Yeah, they've been working hard to get a bipartisan version of this continuing resolution that they can get through the chamber and send over to the House. Now, the House passed one before it left, going through December 4th, and not very many of the so-called anomalies or funding adjustments that you normally see in a continuing resolution to allow the government to operate a little differently than it did the year before, even as you're pulling the funding levels forward. The White House sent up a list, and that was part of the discussions, and then maybe using this vehicle for other things as well. So, going into the weekend, they were optimistic about getting to a deal and getting a bipartisan basis and maybe moving that quickly through the Senate, sending it over to the House, which could deal with it perhaps when it comes back.
Senator Thune has also been pretty clear that that's his preferred funding method, not the Reconciliation 3.0, but that's still on the table for this week as well, right?
It's on the table. There's a lot of interest in doing that from a lot of corners of the Senate. But John Thune has said, show me the path to 50. If you can get me 50 votes to get that passed and to get over the vote-a-rama, the late night series of votes that would entail, maybe they'll move forward on that. Lots of White House pressure in particular to do that with key meetings last week. New budget chairman Ron Johnson, I think, would like to do that as well. And one of the reasons is because the Save America Act is tied up into that, the president's preferred voter administration legislation. While that bill couldn't contain all of it, they're trying to find the budgetary nexus for some of the things they want to do so that they could get that in a possible reconciliation bill. And this would just be the resolution, not the actual bill, but it's the first step that has to be done before you can get there.
That does remind me of a question I wanted to ask you about the continuing resolution, because that has in it a provision that would preempt the administration's grant approval rules. Does it not? Senator Collins is pushing that forward.
She has been interested in that, and we'll see if that's language that survives. She had also said maybe a different bill would be a better vehicle for that, but you always have must-pass legislation as potential vehicles for that sort of thing. And she might want to push for that in this and might get some backing, but that could also become a sticking point later on with the White House and others, so we'll have to see.
It does seem interesting that there's a bipartisan movement to oppose that approach, though.
It does. And, sometimes you get strange bedfellows on these issues, especially when it comes to money for back home and for your constituents. So that'll be an interesting dynamic to watch play out.
There are some other bits of legislation that may come up as the Senate does its work this week, especially one about Russia sanctions in memory of Senator Graham. What are you hearing there?
Yeah, bipartisan support for that. I think 80 plus votes in the two different procedural votes they had last week on that, trying to get consensus on moving that forward, probably a time agreement to speed that up. But it would be a tribute to Lindsey Graham, who was working on that literally, it sounds like, up until when he died. And if they can get that through, it would go back to the House, who would have to accept it. Some Democrats in the House don't love the approach, but I think it was Richard Blumenthal, a senator from Connecticut, who said this can become a law, so let's get behind this and do something unified. So we'll be watching to see if they can get that over the line this week.
Cryptocurrency may also come up, and the revision to college sports.
Those have been two that they've talked about. They've not seemed quite ready. The crypto thing, there was still language being traded back and forth on the ethics part. Democrats working with the White House and Republicans trying to come up with something there. The college sports thing also seems like it might not have everything it needs to do to get over the line before they leave, especially if they try to stick to their schedule of leaving on Friday. But as you mentioned earlier, there are some senators who would love to stay and talk about Save America and other things well into the weekend or even beyond. So we'll have to see.
Well, let's talk about that for just a minute, because there seems to be a lot of political pressure angling to keep the Senate in session. What's your sense on the Hill?
I think there's Republicans and Democrats alike who are ready to take a little break and get away from the action. One of the reasons behind this thing, as I mentioned, is the Save America Act, which is tied up in a lot of different things and hanging over everything. But that's another thing where there haven't been the votes, either the 60 you would need to do it under the normal processes or the 50 to change the filibuster as the president has called for. So people don't want to stay around for something that isn't going to succeed. Sometimes they stay an extra day or two to get something over the line and in the other chamber or even to law, but I'm not sure that that's going to be enough. But we'll see if there's a vote on that. There usually isn't a vote to leave, but some senators have said they may force that. We'll see if that happens.
Well, the whole point of August recess is to get them home, to be with their constituents, and to line up campaigning for the midterm. I know you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the primary space and the midterms. Any news there to share?
Tuesday is a key primary in Michigan, particularly that Senate race that pits kind of the two different brands of Democrats against each other. We've talked about that a lot and seen that a lot in other states. So I think a lot of focus is going to be on that Senate Democratic primary. But there are a lot of states that are voting in August and then into September, the last big push here before November. We'll be watching that very closely.
Loren Duggan is Deputy News Director for Bloomberg Government. Loren, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.